Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see you all. We sent out the agenda last week. Our next item, or really first item, do we have any additions or deletions to our agenda for today? All right, hearing none, I believe we can move on to our next one, the approval of meeting minutes from July 14th, 2025. As always, when we send out the agenda, there's a link you could click onto it. I would like to, at this moment, to approve the minutes for July 14th, 2025. Will someone kindly entertain a motion to accept these minutes?
So moved.
Excellent. I heard Glenn. Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. The motion is now on the floor. Do we have any amendments to these minutes? I'm not hearing any. So let's move to vote to accept these minutes, please. All in favor, just raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All who oppose, please raise your hand or say aye. Fantastic. Hearing none, the motion passes and the minutes are accepted. Thank you very much. Moving on, our next item on our agenda is public comment, but I don't think I'm seeing any members of the public, so I don't know if we're going to have any. Okay. Hearing none, we can move on to our next item. This is our FIP policy review feedback. We reached out to the AGO as well as the Human Rights Commission, HRC, and I know Kelly is here, so I believe Kelly, right, you will go first and give feedback for the FIP policy review.
Sure. Yeah. I'm happy to, but we might want to wait for Julio just so we can have a more. It's better to have all the attorneys in the room first before we start picking it apart, right?
I don't think anyone's ever made that statement. It would be better to have all the attorneys in the room.
I'm only seeing two, so that makes sense. And Lisa, was that why your hand was raised? I think I saw a hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna recommend that we wait until Julio joins us.
Excellent. So I'm just making sure, and Kim, we're not, speaking of lawyers breaking any rules, can we just go to the next item and circle back, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's, so let me just give Julio a little, like, we're ready. I had said, I just thought there'd be more time before we got to this. So I had told him 10 minutes after 11, but I also thought he might hop on a little early. So let me just give him a little, see if he's available right now. Otherwise, yeah, I think we could run through the process for the group. I don't think that would be too big of an issue, but let me just give Julio a hello.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah. Jeez. All right. Yep, I just sent him a quick email.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, and I for the sake of time, I think if the subcommittee is comfortable, I think we can summarize what we've done outside of the meeting, and we being Daniel, Lisa, and I, as far as the outreach that we had talked about. Would the subcommittee be okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Because hopefully Kelly and Julio are gonna have all sorts of good stuff and we don't want to shorten their time. So we reached out to HRC and AGO and luckily they responded right away that they were available for today. And here's Julio, perfect timing. And so we do have our two organizations that were mandated to consult with on the FIP policy here today, which was just phenomenal that they were able to respond on short notice. So Julio, your timing is impeccable. So Julio Thompson is representing the Attorney General's office and has, for many people on this subcommittee, you know that his knowledge of FIP is wide and deep. He has been involved in this area for quite some time. So we're delighted, Julio, that you could be here today to provide our subcommittee feedback as we review the policy and suggest to the council whether or not any updates are necessary before January 1, 2026. So we would love to hear the Attorney General's point of view, Julio.
Sure. I don't know that I have a lot to say, but I do have a couple of topics that I'll just jump straight to. One of the provisions that was new for the 2023, I guess it was, version of the policy, or is it 24?
It was adopted in 2024.
24, sorry. Had to do with limiting access to people who were in law enforcement custody. So there was one requirement for requiring a warrant if someone was in a secure portion of a law enforcement facility. Someone's locked up awaiting transport by a deputy sheriff. And then the other context was what about people who are in custody but they're in a public place, a parking lot, a park, a roadside if there's a traffic stop. And so one of the questions that has come up, and I've looked at it, and I think if the council or the subcommittee members want to look at it and offer their views on what they intend, that might shed light on how we apply those requirements, whether that's a required element. So in the FIP statute, which is 20 VSA or 2366. I'm going from memory.
Yep, 2366.
Had been amended to permit towns to or agencies to include additional restrictions on agency members, quote, communication and involvement with federal immigration authorities, or communications regarding citizenship or immigration status. And at the same time, there's another provision in the policy that's not really relevant to what I'm talking about today, which is that you still can't change your policies to prohibit communications that are permitted by federal law. Those are voluntary communications about whether someone's documented or not, or has a visa or not. But the question, I think, is, or it has come up, I think, in reviewing some of these policies, is whether this policy that says you will give someone access to a federal immigration authority, whether that's something that a town could have something more restrictive on than is otherwise provided in the policy. In other words, if someone shows up and they have a warrant, could the town say, well, we want a court order or something like that, because under the statute, we can have a tighter rule about our, quote, involvement with federal authorities? Or is obeying a warrant not intended to be the sort of involvement with federal authorities that the CJC was thinking of? Does that make sense? Maybe it'd be helpful for me to pull up the statute. just to have it for reference. Let me try that. Do you have 2366 up on your window or your screen?
Yep, we see it.
So A1 is the general requirement about having an FIP policy. And then the statute had later been amended to say that you can have additional restrictions on their communication and involvement with federal immigration authorities. Right? And so that's the question is, when you're talking about relinquishing access or giving access to somebody who's in custody under the FIP policy, whether you are, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, whether that is that the CJC construes that to be some sort of involvement. My own interpretation is no, that's not really following a warrant, is not really what we're talking. Involvement, I had interpreted that to mean things like, can you provide traffic control while we conduct a raid? That sort of involvement where if it's not mentioned in the policy, you could restrict that. But, it has come up because we have encountered policies that just say we won't give you access, period. Which is not permitted by the policy unless, that provision I just quoted to you allows them to do so. Does that make sense now? Guess I'll wait for any kind of reaction from folks.
So, Julio, I guess I'm wondering, so your question is to the subcommittee, like how we would interpret the policy in that situation, and or is it an issue of how the policy is currently written, that the base, the base statewide model policy, states that you cannot hand someone over without a warrant.
Right.
In those situations that there's an issue with where the base is, or is it a different question of the base is fine and legal, but is it okay for towns or agencies to require more from the federal government in those situations?
Yeah, I that's a really helpful way of reframing it. I guess what I would say is that I have interpreted it now to mean that, so there's a provision in the policy that says, and I could pull it up as well. I share that just to illustrate my point. And I apologize, my browser closed and said it had to update just before I logged in, so I lost my tabs, but here we are. So the FIP policy, do you have the section that says restricted access to agency facility?
Yep.
Okay, so what this says is basically, unless you have a criminal warrant or some other law enforcement purpose exclusive of civil immigration laws, if you have someone who's in your building and they're in a non-public area, you will not give them access unless they have a warrant or they've got some reason unrelated to civil immigration law. For example, it could be someone comes in and says, we're trying to identify somebody who's a suspect in a shooting. And they have federal immigration agents, include like Homeland Security investigations, which does criminal cases, and they show up. So the question is like, so if a town says, we're not going to grant access to people, our interpretation to date has been, well, you have to follow this language here because that's what the council says. You won't give access unless they have a warrant. So you've got to follow a warrant. And if they have a law enforcement purpose that's unrelated to civil immigration, you have to give them access. Notwithstanding the statute, which says that you can include additional restrictions. See what I'm saying? On
Right.
involvement with federal immigration authorities. So the question is, so right now we are applying this to say this statute doesn't allow someone to override what's in the FIP policy about access here. But if the council disagrees with that and wants to clarify that a town could, or an agency could have something stricter than what's required here, I'm not sure what they could do to lawfully defy a warrant, but this other legitimate law enforcement purpose exclusive of the civil immigration laws is a little broader. So let's imagine hypothetically a town says we want to have a restriction where you have no access unless you have a warrant, period.
Mm-hmm.
Can they therefore in their policy delete this language under the authority of the statute that says we can have additional restrictions on involvement with federal immigration authorities?
Mm-hmm.
That's really the question. Thus far, we are saying, no, that's not. That involvement with immigration authorities elsewhere in the policy really talks about information sharing. It talks about sharing resources, participating in enforcement efforts and the like. But the council may well say, no, we think that a town should be able to have a warrants only rule if they want it. And then I think they can either just vote and say that's how we interpret this, or they can do something with the language. I guess that's their option. In accordance with whatever your general counsel, your legal counsel, the council's counsel can say. But I think that's an issue that has arisen that had not arisen last year when we were all talking about this in 2024 at some length. But that was a practical application of it.
Okay.
I apologize for taking a while to getting to the point.
No, that was helpful.
And the other areas I don't think have really come up in terms of providing sticking points for practice. Do you have now the federal law on your screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 8 USC 1373. So we've been focusing a lot for years, really, our office and the CJC, on the language in this federal statute that talks about restricting communications, information regarding, here's a phrase, information regarding the citizenship or immigration status of an individual. And state law, actually, the FIP statute, subsection F, says you can't have a policy that contravenes whatever the lawful operation of this statute is. But there are other provisions of the statute that we have not really discussed in the group. One of them is other restrictions, so whether an agency can maintain such information. So 1373 says you can't have a restriction on an agency if they decide to maintain information about immigration or citizenship status. You can't prohibit that. So in practice, that could apply if an agency had a policy saying that, if a member has information that they're required to get citizenship or immigration status information for a lawful purpose or a state or local purpose, such as obtaining a visa for a victim or something like that, if they had a document destruction policy that says immediately upon the closure of that case, you will destroy those records. And what if the agency says, we don't want to, we want to keep it, we don't destroy any of our records? 1373 addresses, or it says that you can't, at least on its face, that the state or local authority can't restrict an agency from maintaining the information if it wants to. Doesn't have to, but it does. But if it wants to, we came in reviewing policies in the last year. We did come upon one records retention policy, and it turns out the language of that records retention policy didn't quite address the scenario I'm talking about, but it brought to mind that 1373 does more than talk about communications with federal authorities. It talks about maintaining these records. Right now, the FIP policy says nothing about records retention. And so it could be that an agency has such a policy. Right now, it would be outside the scope of the FIP policy. And, if it conflicts with the federal law, it wouldn't have any effect. But the CJC would have no enforcement stake in it because the FIP policy is just silent on what you do with your records. And it could be that that's what the CJC wants to do. They just want to they want to confine their actions to interactions with the public, interactions with other agencies, and that's it, and leave the subject alone, which is fine. But it was just something that caught my notice in doing one of the reviews that I thought you ought to be aware of so you can make a choice about what to do, if anything. And I'm speaking again as a lawyer doing the reviews here, not as a member of the CJC. That's Domenica, so I'm not offering a policy viewpoint on that. And similarly, with respect to subsection 3 here, we had been spending a lot of time in the FIP policy talks a lot about exchanging information with federal authorities. But 1373 says that you can't limit the exchange of such information. This is information about immigration or citizenship status with other state or local government entities as well. That's not mentioned in the FIP policy. Again, we don't have a position on it. It had this part of while there has been litigation about this statute, that requirement that, that agencies be free to communicate with other local or state agencies about immigration status, as far as I know, has never been litigated. But again, it is something that came to my notice during one of the reviews. It didn't create, again, a conflict, but it was, it was a question that was presented like, looking at the FIP policy, I see that it was silent on the subject. And again, we don't have a policy provision or not, whether that matters. We don't know whether it's a practice that even occurs. I can tell you that, I think I can speak for our office. Any communications our office and the AGs would have with other agencies regarding immigration status would only be in the context of a criminal case, which would be permissible anyways. It could be, it could be an ICAC, internet crimes against children, possession of child sexual abuse materials, and the like. But again, I'm just pointing out that this is something that the FIP policy doesn't say anything about. And so, but I thought I would just raise it for your attention. That's what I had.
Anyone on the subcommittee have any questions for Julio? Julio, go ahead, Daniel.
I'm just taking down some notes, and first off, too, thank you, Julio, for being here.
Sure.
And as I was taking down notes, it sounds like maybe there's not so much a conflict with the policy right now, but maybe we could clarify an issue or two. and this is very layman's terms, but just as I was writing down notes, is that accurate? We just, maybe we could clarify a little bit more.
Well, I think if you think that I think only one thing needs to be clarified. I've raised 3 topics. One had to do with access to people in custody. I've told you how we've been interpreting that, which is to say that it's something that people have to follow. They have to follow what's in the FIP policy. And if you think that that's an incorrect or, too narrow of an interpretation, then I think that the CJC should make that clear and vote on it. Otherwise, if we have someone that says no access unless there's a warrant, we're going to continue to say, well, the FIP policy says this, and so therefore you need to follow it, and if you don't follow it, it's adopted by statute anyway. And again, if that's not what you wanted, then you are the body. You're the only people who really could change that as a matter of practice. For the other 2 about maintaining records, I don't think there's any ambiguity at all. I'm just pointing out that federal law, that same federal statute that is mentioned in the FIP policy and says you can't restrict voluntary communications with the feds, also says you can't restrict agencies from keeping the records if they have something in writing about immigration status. You can't limit them, and that has not been tested in court, but it's just not mentioned. And agencies do, I think many government agencies do have records retention policies. And it is conceivable, it hasn't happened yet, but it's conceivable that an agent will say, we'll want to treat immigration related documents as a category 1 to dispose of those sooner. Or not. So it's just something that's not addressed at all by the policy. I don't have a view about whether it should be. And I think Kim on the call, and I think let's see, the chief's there. Mr. Boyd, you were there. I guess there are more people here than I thought who were part of those conversations. But I think those of you who were, you can remember we really didn't talk about records retention at all.
Yeah.
So I'm just mentioning it now, maybe because there's a little bit more oxygen in the room, because we spent so much time on a lot of changes last time. This time there really aren't that many. And then the third one about communications with other agencies is just something that, again, we noticed. It hasn't created a conflict, but if it's there, if the council wants to address it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing
Sure.
that, for being here today. And I believe we have Kelly with HRC. I believe, Kelly, it's your turn now, unless there's any other questions or comments.
Thank you, Julio, so much. It's really helpful.
Yeah, so, and I just wanted to also say thank you to Julio, and it's nice to see you. I've heard only good things about you. So our office was looking at the policy in a different way, I think, than the AG's office was looking at it. So our office is content with the policy as it is, seeing as it's just been rolled out, very recently. We would, in the future, as time goes and we're continuing to review the policy, like to add additional protections for other protected classes, specifically people with disabilities. That's one thing that we feel that in Vermont, that's at least what our office sees is the biggest area protected class of people making complaints in Vermont. There really isn't a whole lot of mention in this policy about that and about how, but we're talking down the road, and this is all not I don't know if you want me to save my comments for another time, but I just want to be clear that we're not making any recommendations for something to change before January 1. We're hoping to, in the coming months, years, to add protections to make it more robust, and to specifically mention certain groups, such as people with disabilities, people from the queer community, LGBTQIA folks, and also, BIPOC or, Indigenous people of color within Vermont. We were hoping to get a little bit more specificity about that. As we all know, there's a lot of specificity around immigration, and communications between agencies and all that. These are the times we live in. It's important. We feel that the policies stay as it is for the time being, and then hopefully add those mentioned, and with working with everybody. We want to make sure that we're not just adding language for the fact of adding it. We want it to be worthwhile and actually accomplish things. And I want to recognize also that there is, in the definition section, and I'll just pull up the very beginning of the policy on page 3, where we're talking about definitions. We do mention personal characteristics and list out all of those things, but it kind of gets buried in the rest of the policy. So our office would like to see those other groups mentioned, but like I said, going in the, looking towards in the years to come. So this is our office looks at this as we're only going to get better from here. It's just going to keep getting more and more inclusive and accomplish the goals of fair and impartial policing in Vermont. So, Julio, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, or if anybody wants to share any commentary or feedback.
I'll just say legally, I guess that's really what I'm here for, not really for the policy side. I'm not the right person for that. But when we are talking about disability, I think in law enforcement, we're really talking about mental health. That's the most common sort of encounter with law enforcement. And it's important, I think, also to understand under federal law, and I think all of our agencies, or not all, but all of them are still subject to state law, certainly the Public Accommodations Act. And disability protections in terms of the treatment that people are afforded applies to people not only with a disability, which includes substance abuse disorder, but also people who are perceived to be disabled or perceived to have a disability, or people who are associated with someone, and so maybe a spouse or family member who has a disability. And so if they're intentionally treated in a way that's that's discriminatory, that's biased in a way because of their disability or perceived or connection to a disabled person, especially with substance abuse disorder, mental health, those, it would be covered by those laws. I've seen some agencies that have separate policies in dealing with that issues because they're often intertwined with other obligations like referral to local resources and so forth. The last time I've seen a policy, I don't think it was a Vermont policy, but dealing with people with those kind of support needs, those policies can be like 5 or 10 pages on their own. So, but yeah, it is definitely covered by both state and federal law. So that's all I had to add there.
And, certainly our office is aware of that, but to have it in the have the language in the policy, so that law enforcement, they're keeping it kind of in the front of their mind. Because certainly there's a claim, that if discriminatory conduct is occurring, but, to have that language in the policy, reminding law enforcement about those folks with invisible disabilities. So that's, but you're 100,000% correct. Thank you.
And Kelly, when you say, see it more in the policy, and again, I appreciate that you're not doing a deep dive now, but saying this is something to look out and spend time on, but do you envision if it was something that the council took on and wanted to address more in the fair and impartial policing policy, that it's in the policy, like the interactions with individuals with disabilities, like
A little bit
suggestions on
more, right,
how to interact or best practices?
right, that's what I had in mind. I mean, we're seeing in the policy as it is, some situational explanations about, okay, you have someone with this sort of immigration situation, you can do this, you can't do that. Potentially that could be helpful, you know. I don't want to I don't know if it's productive for us to get into a laundry list of every possible eventuality that could pop up, but just potentially some of the bigger ones. I mean, just what comes to mind, you know, SFSTs and folks with disabilities. I'm sure that will be standardized field sobriety tests, the administration of which would be tricky for certain individuals with disabilities, including invisible disabilities. So that's just one example I can think of that would come up regularly for officers that could make sense. But, you know, I don't want to have a 20-page guide to best practices. But, you know, the point, you know, a lot of what our office sees is that folks just they're not aware, or it's not in the front of their minds. You know, maybe they learn that someone with a physical disability, when you ask, you know, can you do the one leg stands? Do you have any disabilities that would affect your ability to do this? Well, you know, do you have any neurological disability? Do you have any disability at all that could, you know, we're normally thinking about physical disabilities, and things that not so much necessarily, you know, something that would affect their balance. Maybe they have vertigo. I don't know. So, and I see Chief's hand. I'll let you weigh in there, Chief.
Chris,
Sorry,
did you have
wait.
something?
Yeah, I just, I do recognize that in the policy, under the definitions, under personal characteristics, that includes everybody. Not only, you know, actual, but perceived differences. So technically that is in there. I completely understand what Kelly is saying, because other than that section, this is an immigration policy, and that's all it's about. And so while it's titled the Fair and Impartial Policing Policy, it's centered around, and everybody's mindset is around immigration. And really that's where it kind of focuses on, and then your interaction with federal authorities and what you can and can't do. So I think towards the end of the policy, in the training section, that might be an area in which to identify additional training around such things as disabilities or things other than immigration. I would just, and I'm not saying this to dissuade, I would just be cautious of muddying the waters and adding a lot more content to something that is, in my head, as a former law enforcement officer, very immigration focused and immigration centric, for law enforcement to understand what they should and should not do, to make communities feel safe. But that doesn't mean that that's the only community that they need to make feel safe as well. So just more a commentary than anything else.
I think Julio, your hand is up as well.
just chiming in here is a bit of a historian, maybe for Kelly's benefit. To follow up on the chief's viewpoint, I think, and I think this, I have the year right this time, in 2023, the statewide training on the FIP policy had an emphasis on hate crimes. We covered the whole policy, including immigration and the other protected category, but the angle or the area of emphasis was really on hate crimes because the idea was being, fair and impartial policing. It means meeting community needs and recognizing bias incidents when they occur and responding to them in an appropriate way to recognize how it has a multiplier effect on communities and has a especially high impact on victims. So that was the example that I'm aware of where there was like a special emphasis, and I know about that because our civil rights unit, we enforce the civil hate crimes law, and so we were asked to present that. We co-presented with our federal partners, and also we had an immigration lawyer who's now no longer with us, but present on the immigration side. So that there is some history, or there's some precedent for that, is what I'm saying.
Thanks, Julie. I know I'm a newcomer, so any historical knowledge is much appreciated from anybody else as well. So thanks.
And yeah, I think Director Brickell, I think I just saw your hand up as well.
Yeah, I was just going to have one more comment to piggyback on what Julio said regarding the training section, right? We spent a lot of time, Susanna's office provided a lot of funding, making sure that this policy was translated into several languages as well as an ASL video. That training component should also be identified in the training section, as far as like law enforcement knows that they have somebody that's non-English speaking, that they have a requirement to get a valid interpreter for that person. What do they do with the deaf and hard of hearing? Right? They have that same obligation and same responsibility, but training that's directed to maybe here's your list of folks that you can contact, or however that training component could be better identified and making sure that we're addressing all communities and not just focusing on immigration.
Just want to say again, thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks, Julio, for being here, for all of that fruitful commentary. And again, taking down a lot of notes. Hopefully this will, Lisa and Kim and I can circle back on that. I believe unless if we have any other questions or comments, we can move on to our next item, FIP policy update, review outreach process. I think, Kim, we sort of introduced it a little while ago, so we're circling back. And yeah, that is item number 6. And I think, Lisa, were you going to maybe have a couple comments for us about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mentioned this at the council meeting, so sorry for being redundant, but I know a couple folks weren't there. So basically, everyone on the council should have received an email from me regarding providing feedback to the FIP policy, either written communication or through again emailing me. Specific to community members, we created a survey through SurveyMonkey. That's 7 questions. It takes less than 5 minutes. So that was a couple weeks ago, and I just checked this morning. I still have 0 responses, which is a bit concerning. However, when I sent it out, I recognized a lot of our community partners, like Migrant Justice and AALV offices, were completely closed during that week. So I will follow up. But anyways, the ask for feedback and input is out there. I also sent it to all law enforcement agency heads, so chiefs, sheriffs, DMV, Fish and Wildlife, liquor and lottery. So everybody should have it, and I've asked them to share it with their respective colleagues, staff, and communities. I asked for feedback, whether written or through the survey by September 1st, so that I had time to kind of gather and put any themes together for our meeting on September 8th. So I'll just let you know that for the community partners, the folks I reached out to, I sent it to, of course, the Vermont Network. Hopefully they can push it out to their member orgs. I'm sure Sarah probably did that. Vermont Asylum Assistance Project, Vermont Refugee and Immigration, Migrant Justice, AALV, the Root Social Justice, Vermont People of Color Network, ACLU, and Vermont Law and Graduate School Center for Justice Reform and Immigration Clinic. I did hear from Brett Stokes, who directs the VLGS clinics, that he would definitely send the survey to his students, and that he anticipates students wanting to attend that September 8th meeting. So again, if there's other folks that you all know or other communities, please forward it on to them. And I'll just say why I have the floor. I do, regardless of who's providing written feedback, they know at this meeting is the September 8th meeting is designated for giving feedback. So I do anticipate it being a full meeting and likely longer than an hour. So please make sure that you're at that meeting so that we have quorum. And I think that's all I have for that part. Kim, am I missing anything, Daniel?
Just briefly, I will add to, for folks who don't know, I'm with the Windham County NAACP, and I mentioned that we just had a meeting last week. And again, there were more than a few members that I believe will be at the next meeting and that will have feedback for us. And hopefully I will remind them about the survey. But that's all I got to add. Thanks. All right. I believe our next item number 7 for today, is the resource toolkit. We brought this up in our last meeting, and I believe, again, Lisa created like a folder for us. I don't know if, Lisa, if you have any comments about that, any updates about the resource toolkit.
Yeah, I'll just say that you all should have received some type of email invitation from Teams. Karen, I think I let you know that I sent it to your partner email. Daniel, I connected with Lindsay, and I think you've contacted her about getting you a partner email, and that's in the process. It's just easier for you both to be able to use Teams really inclusively for this. So anyways, if you go to your Teams and channels, you will see FIP Subcommittee. Again, I put all of these instructions in email, but if you go to the Home tab, it'll bring you right to, maybe I'll just share it. Might be easier. Give me 1 second. Just let me know. Can you see this? All right. So if you go to the Home page, I've created the folders that we discussed at our last July meeting. Accessibility, bias and data collection and reporting, de-escalation and conflict management, implicit bias, language access, trauma-informed policing. Any of you can go in there and drop anything in. So it's pretty accessible. It's pretty easy. I'd really like to start building this out. And I think, a little bit of like what Chief was talking about a few minutes ago of training. Once we have kind of this toolkit, we might be able to take pieces of it to focus on some parts of what 2027 training would look like. So I think it's like it's an open folder. You can put anything in at any time. And if you have issues with it, just let me know and I'll see if I can navigate it. And if I can't, I'll have to bring in our tech guy who's much more adept at this than I am. Kelly.
So I uploaded, I started looking at the folders and trying to figure out what we wanted to put in. Our office obviously has tons of resources specifically on bias and accessibility, but I don't want to go overboard and upload.
Yeah,
I
no,
guess I wanted, I started doing work and then I was like, wait, I could go in 17 different, I can do a
Sure.
lot here. So I better
Yeah.
clarify what we want to see. Are we looking for, because a lot of the resources I have as well are we use, you know, short little videos and trainings, or so I guess I was just wondering, what are we looking only for written things? Are we looking for videos? Are we looking for anything and everything?
I think that the means, and Kim and Daniel, feel free to jump in, can be anything, right? Like you said, like mini PowerPoint, a video, but really the focus should be for law enforcement. So when we're talking about, you know, being inclusive of different communities and identities, and exactly what Chief was talking about with translation, they're required to provide translation. How many officers know that? I don't know. Or have the tools to? I don't know. So dropping in things like that. I'm just looking at Susanna. How much is too much to add? I mean, I wouldn't like put in like PDFs or, you know, research articles, because they're not even going to look at it, you know, once we compile it. But at the same time, like, put in whatever you think makes sense, and then we'll review it as a committee, as a subcommittee, and then decide what's, you know, important enough or accessible or utilization wise to put out to law enforcement, and we can go from there. I don't know what you have for materials, so I'm not going to tell you exactly what to put, but you know, I think anything's helpful. Kim or Daniel might have more.
Thanks, Lisa. And yeah, that great question, great comments. And I'm going to echo too. I feel like it's better to have more, and then we can always, as we review it, we can always trim, you know, make changes there. Again, as an educator, I'm very happy to hear that you have a lot of material coming. So that's fantastic. And yeah, I'd say absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Kelly. And Susanna, I saw your comment too. Thank you very much.
Kim, did you have anything to add? No.
Completely agree. I mean, throw it all in there. Luckily, it's digital files, so it's not like you're putting a stack on our desk, and it'll be nice to sift through, and some things will go in the toolkit, and some things may inspire other thoughts and ideas, or, you know, be the basis for some other training down the road, or, you know, so I think any information is good information at this point. And I think like this project is going to be one of those, like, we throw it all in and then we realize like, oh wait, what were we thinking about this? And then, you know, and we'll trim and throw more things in, and it'll kind of accordion back and forth for a little while until we get what we want. I mean, it's the first time we're doing this as a group, so I'd say don't edit yourself too early.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the clarification.
Thank you, Kelly. And yeah, thank you, Kim, for your remarks. All right, folks, I'm looking at our agenda, agenda item number 8. I believe it's time motion to adjourn, unless if anybody has any other questions or comments. Yes, Kim.
Just had a, and this is not on the agenda, but it is organizational, so I hope folks will be okay with this. Lisa had mentioned our next meeting, we likely will want folks to be prepared to go more than an hour, so that we're not rushing people through their commentary. Can folks commit to that, or do we need to send something around as far as timing? I just want to make sure we're ready for the September meeting. I know we had to do this quickly, and I know that may not feel great for folks, so I just don't want the meeting itself to feel rushed in September, for folks to give feedback on the policy. So I don't know, Daniel, if we want to have that, how the subcommittee feels about talking now about maybe extending to 90 minutes or a little bit more, or whether folks can just budget to go long if we go long.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Kim, for bringing that up. I anticipate it'll go longer too, at least 90 minutes. So I think just Again, giving everybody a heads up about that. And Lisa, I think your hand is up too.
Yeah, I had a different comment, but I can comment on this. I think the idea was like to go to 1 hour for the summer, and knowing things are going to pick up back in the fall, I think it makes sense just to schedule it like it's been from 11 to 1. And then if we end early, that's fine too. But I think I want to just allow the space for community members and law enforcement together in one room to be able to have enough time to get feedback. And then my other comment was, I hope to see you all in person at the next council meeting.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Kim, for bringing that up. And yes, I will certainly strive to be there in person. It was lovely to see a lot of folks at the Academy earlier this summer. Okay. And again, unless there's any other last minute questions or comments, I believe we're at our last item, motion to adjourn. Will someone,
Kelly has
sorry.
Just briefly, I was hoping, and I think maybe Lisa, you could just send it to me, but if I could take the FIP training just to see, because I'm still new, so I would love to see what the training looks like. And
I think I sent it to you. Didn't we talk about this last week?
You sent me lots of things, but I don't know if I saw that.
All right,
one.
that's fair. I will go look right now and send that over to you.
No worries. Thank you. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
You're welcome.
All right. I think truly it is now time. Will someone entertain a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll move. This is Susanna.
Thank you, Susanna. Will someone second the motion?
I'll second it. This is Karen.
Thank you so much, Karen. Always a joy to see you all. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.